Welcome to Healing Wisdom, a Thursday morning talk show featuring guests sharing their stories and knowledge. We discuss the healing aspects of the arts, metaphysics, social justice, and adventure through all types of terrain. So join me, Pandora Peoples, here on WOMR 92.1 FM in Provincetown and WFMR 91.3 FM in Orleans. We're streaming worldwide at WOMR.org. Our theme music is provided by Mason. You can find her website at masonmusic.com. That's MAESYN. My guest today is Linda Go. She is a registered death doula, trainer, practical mystic, sound healer, spiritual educator in the shamanic arts. Today we're talking about the end of life from a spiritual perspective. So thank you, Linda, for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
I would love for you to tell us about your overarching educational mission.
As far as my death doula training, my educational mission is to share my shamanic practices that I have accrued and practiced for maybe a lot of years, 20 plus, and also my Western training as a hospice volunteer. And I have had a traditional training also from another institute for end of life care. So I've combined them and married them together to create a more holistic end of life care training, which also addresses living well. So this isn't just about end of life and you train just to help somebody at the end. This is for helping people now, young people, all kinds of ages, and whether you're healthy or not healthy or dying or think you're going to live forever. The training is for that.
First, could you talk about your training with Susan Weed and Huichol and plant shaman and author of Plant Spirit Medicine, Elliot Cowan? I would love to hear about the lineage of Don Lucio de Campo and how this path of being a death doula unfolded for you.
Well, it started way before them, but as a child, I used to hear voices like spirits, disembodied people asking for help. It wasn't until The Sixth Sense came out later when I was an adult, I was like, oh, I was that kid, because I didn't really see the entities in front of me like in the movie. I just could feel them and hear them. And they were always asking for help. They'd say stuff like, where am I? Can you see me? How do I get out of here? And when I told my parents, mostly they thought I was making it up, but basically it just, it upset them. They didn't want me to really engage in that kind of talk. So I had to just keep it to myself. So I also had, as I was growing up as a teenager, a very traumatic experience with someone from high school that cared about me a lot. And then I had met them at a dance, had one dance with them and promised to see them on Monday, that we'd start to maybe develop our relationship. And then he was killed that night in a very bad car accident. And that's the premise of Sweeter, the song that you heard from, I guess, where did you hear it on? Spotify
I heard it on Bandcamp. Yeah. So
Bandcamp.
I forgot to say you're also a musician. So folks can find you, Linda Go, on SoundCloud. Not only are you a singing shaman, but you're also a musician. And so folks can find that song Sweeter. And also Black Roses is really beautiful. And you have amazing kirtan music as well.
Thank you. Yeah, so I would put these experiences with, say, other world kind of interactions in music. And musically, what was really interesting that was also happening to me since I was a young child is hearing music constantly, complete compositions, music with lyrics, all different styles. And, when you're back in the day, there wasn't any internet. It wasn't like there was very much going on. And most of it was going on in my inner world. So that was something that was pretty solid for me. So by the time I was a teenager, I certainly didn't share this information, what I was receiving, with anyone. But it definitely gave me a feeling of having some kind of support team, a musical body. There's this whole musical repertoire, or I don't even know what to call it, library, that was constantly available. I could just listen and stream whatever I wanted to bring out into the world. And that was very, very unusual, but still it brought me to understanding and believing in the unseen real. And that's basically the foundation of shamanism.
So how did you begin the study of herbal medicine?
So I graduated from college with a degree in fine arts, and I was using it to look for work as an illustrator in Manhattan. And some of my artwork was purchased by well-known greeting card companies. And then when I saw what they did to the artwork, I was really appalled. I couldn't believe it. I don't know. I get hurt easily. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is what they did with this beautiful painting. So I took my art and I just wanted to do something different. And most of my art was plants, flowers, and botanical, paintings. And I had a love for plants. I worked in a greenhouse to support myself while I was in college. So I had this kind of relationship kind of percolating. And I also made my own teas from, things that were growing out in the yard without having too much, book knowledge. I just had this sense. Anyways, I ended up becoming or answering an ad for a job as a landscape designer. And lo and behold, this wonderful man hired me without any real degree in landscape design. I didn't understand that it said a degree in design, which I had a degree in graphic design, and plant knowledge, horticulture knowledge. So I began working for this man and created wonderful gardens for his company's clients, won all kinds of awards. Then I went out on my own. I decided I wanted to be my own boss. I was kind of tired of working for, men. Not that there's anything wrong with men, but I really wanted to have a kind of a woman-owned business and see if I could, make it on my own, which I did. But during that time, I had my best friend who helped me. We created this wonderful organic. We were the first woman-owned organic landscape company design business. And I started to get into herbalism very slowly. So how I met Susan Weed is pretty amazing. So my aunt had a book called Wise Woman's Tradition for the Menopausal Years by Susan Weed. And they knew I was in herbalism and I was teaching classes in a continuing education department in Connecticut, where my business was at the time. So they gave me this book and said, you should teach, this herbal kind of stuff for women. It's really necessary and you love this. But I was far from menopause. And so none of that stuff really interested me. I was more into like childbearing years or something like that. We had been hospicing. So I was also in hospice at the time because we were hospicing my best friend's father who was dying. And he and I were pretty close. And when he died, it did something to me on a spiritual level that I really hadn't prepared for. I didn't even really know it could happen, but now I do. I ended up starting to bleed. I began to, my menses was just not stopping. And it was really alarming. I was becoming more anemic. It was interrupting my daily, my day to day, and it was hard to work. And I had to go to the doctors finally, and they diagnosed me right away. Oh my gosh, it's most likely ovarian or uterine cancer. We're going to have to do biopsies. And the biopsy got botched, but I couldn't stop bleeding. And they ended up, the doctor put me on a med called, I think it was called Provera. And I didn't want to take it without consulting my mom and my aunt, who were nurses, and to ask, do we have any contraindications with this drug? Because the doctor wants me to go on it to stop the bleeding, so they can keep me alive before we find out what's wrong. But both of them were away on vacation. This was before cell phones, so I had no way to get a hold of them. And in the meantime, I'm taking this Provera, and by day 2, I can't move. I'm wearing diapers, to try to keep myself from bleeding all over the place. And by day 2, I feel like something like the ceiling has come down to about here, and that someone is standing on my shoulders. And I'm feeling so depressed. I can't believe the way I feel. And I've never felt this way before. So I told my best friend at the time, I told her, I said, I think this drug is making me feel like I want to kill myself. I feel so awful. I want to die, and I don't know what to do. I want to get off the drug. I need to do something. And I think I can't take this medicine. So I called up the doctor and explained what was going on. And he says to me, "Oh, that can't be happening. My mother's on that and she feels fine." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? That is your answer?" I said, "I don't feel fine. I feel something is terribly wrong. I'm not going to take it. I know this is what it is. I know it's this drug." And then he signed off on me. He said, "If you don't take it, then you're no longer my patient. I can't stand by you. And, you're just going to bleed to death." So it was like really horrible. So I went, "Fine. Okay, great." And I hung up. I stopped taking it. And in the meantime, while I was waiting for that day to be over, there's the book my aunt had given me, just sitting there on the coffee table. And I thought, well, I've got to sit and wait now to see how things are going to progress or not progress. And I'm reading to kind of keep my mind calm. And in this book, I found the herb shepherd's purse and how it can stop bleeding. And now remember, this is like, oh gosh, this is like the late 90s. It isn't like there's 5,000 herbal companies out there with all this product available. I think I wrote it down on a piece of paper. My friend went out and searched like the 2 co-ops in the whole state to find it. Yeah, there's no Amazon at the time to mail it to us. Oh my gosh, she showed up with it. I practically drank the whole bottle. And a miracle occurred, of course. The bleeding stopped. I'd already gotten off the chemical, the Provera, and by the next day, it was like almost like 6 to 8 hours later, it was like, there goes the ceiling. Suddenly the dark curtain lifts. I start to be able to feel that I'll be okay. And I looked at more in the book, and I started to make compounds and drink really nourishing teas like nettle to nourish my blood, and lots of other things. And in about a week or 2, my anemia I could feel my energy restored. I was no longer bleeding. And then the biopsy came back. That after they botched it, they did another one, and the biopsy came back, and there wasn't anything wrong. So it was something else. I realized I had this feeling. It was linked somehow to my grief, the grief of losing someone that I loved. But I didn't really know what to do with that at that point. But I did write a letter, of course, back in the day, writing letters, wrote a letter to Susan Weed, and I thanked her for saving my life. She really did. I really felt that it was a miracle. And next thing I know, it was like, I don't know, a week later, she calls me, and she loved the letter, and she wants me to come and take her internship at her place that summer. And we were going to do an exchange because she knew I had the landscape business. So she said, "You can restore a bunch of my gardens for an exchange." it was like a dream come true. So that summer, Claudia and I went out there and had a wonderful experience with Susan Weed, who it was like being with a relative. She was just.
I am so happy to be back with part 2 of my conversation with Linda Go. She is a end of life doula. She is a shamanic singer in that capacity and with herbs. And she's going to talk with us about threshold herbs, dreams, and end of life, and the more spiritual aspects of the end of life process. So can you talk with us about the difference between typical end of life care and the shamanic path? You have a school and you do trainings on this style and this approach. So can you define the two different methods?
Western style EOL care is really usually about the last 3 to 2 months of someone's life. It is a support for hospice and palliative care a lot of times. So if someone's already in palliative care in their home, they could have an end of life doula in the Western approach, helping them with chores around the house, et cetera, and doing other things too, but being not only a companion, but, helping the person to get ready and prepare for end of life. It's fairly practical, and it also is pretty much all about the material plane. There is some doulas that do maybe, some other practices to help people to calm down, but otherwise it's pretty standard. It's just a extension of hospice, and it has a little bit more to offer. So I did get my training in that also after hospice, and I had been on the shamanic path for about 10 years. I was initiated shaman in the Nahua tradition with Don Lucio de Campo. And so the work that I'd already been preparing for with working with spirit and helping others to live the best life they could by embracing death. During every day, you start to have very cool practices that help us to be in the moment, to be heart-centered, etc. And in the shamanic traditions, also there was a lot of work in the spirit world, transitioning and doing dream journeys and stuff like that. So I also was a certified yoga instructor and continuing education provider. So I would train yoga teachers too. And I was at that moment deep into the tantric practices, the Vajana Bhairava, Spanda Karika, and the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, where these ancient practices were in alignment with a lot of the shamanic stuff I had, discovered in my 10 years of shamanic practice and what I still continue to do as a solo practitioner. That when we connect with the unseen world, and we use our imaginal field, our heart as the central, place where we connect with source, and we go into a place where we are always feeling perfectly healthy. We're in the prime of our life. We're always, we're able to explore so much without limitations because we're in an imaginal field. We're moving in a heart space. So we're doing it for the love of ourselves, how to encourage ourselves to be more open and compassionate with others, and how to see that we're all the same. Everything is one. These practices are old, and then they also help us to realize a lot about the fleetingness and the illusory nature of the material world. And when you start to put more of your eggs in the spiritual basket versus putting it all into the material plane, you have less attachment to the earth plane like this is it, and getting very anxious about growing old, say, even, or not having things go your way. But when you invest in the eternalness of yourself, there isn't any end to this. There might be an end to this particular form that I'm wearing at this time, or the place that I'm inhabiting, the people that I communicate with or have relationships with. But inside, as we know in our dreams, if you're a dreamer, which I'm a big one, is that I have such a rich and amazing life when I'm asleep, when I'm meditating. My soul is bigger than just being, Linda Go in this role that I'm playing at this current time. And that's when I realized that there's so much more than this. So what I decided to do was start my own training, where I bring in this shamanic element of ancient practices. This isn't like, well, you got to have rattles and stuff. It has nothing to do with any kind of thing that is not practical, is not really going to be a self practice that you can start to do today, way before it's 2 months before you leave this planet. You want to start these practices now and find how much more you are before you die. And this includes a very interesting aspect is trauma release. I do also teach the death doulas in the training a form of somatic release, which I call let go yoga. So it falls under the yoga for EOL care. It has sound releases, meditation, breath releases, a lot of cool stuff. And a lot of it is very old too, I discovered. This isn't new, somatic release. It was Sufis practiced it, and the tantric rishis practiced it too. So that's my kind of passion, is to, not only passion, but my path is to share what all this time, everything that's happened to me, and then how it sort of just kept formulating and coming to this beautiful place of simplicity, practicality, and also how to change the way our whole society, our whole culture looks at not only death, but even growing old and getting to a certain place in life, and how we can think of these as sacred passages versus, and then you die, and that's it, the end.
Can you talk about what led you to see the importance of this sort of shifting, it sounds like, of a paradigm, or shifting attitudes around death, and why the release is complementary to aging gracefully?
Are we speaking first about how does the let go somatic release work into it? What's the point behind that?
Why did you find that it was so important for this transition to be extended? Like, why do we really need more than 2 months?
This is also documented in lots of books that are out now about NDEs. So this brought me to a lot of understanding in my dream world. I'm a very prolific dreamer, and in my dreams, many of them are rather lucid enough that I actually know I'm dreaming. I practiced as a young adult, training myself, because I would get music through dreams too, as we talked about in the beginning of the other conversation we were having earlier today. So I wanted to always stay somewhat lucid. So if a song came in and it had all the lyrics and all the chords and all the changes, I would be right there waking up. I had my pad and pencil there, or pen, and or my recording device, and I would be awake and get it all down so that then I could go back to sleep and see what else came to me. So I was not, I was in and out. And this is how this transition stuff started to happen, which is super interesting to me. I still love it. At the time, I was having dreams of people coming to me after I was little. Once you get to teenage years, it all shifted. I didn't have them showing up in my bedroom or on the street, like in The Sixth Sense. Instead, they would come into my dreams and they would say, "Hello, can you help me? Where am I?" Stuff like that. And I'd be like, "Who are you?" And they would have these conversations. And then all of a sudden, I started seeing people that I knew. that had just passed that would be like looking at me like, where am, same thing. And I began to walk with them to see where we were, to find a direction. Was there a route? Was there some place I could bring them to? And I practiced a lot. I kind of like daydream and practice and remap. I follow these maps in and out. And eventually, I talked to my shaman at the time when this started to get very much more serious. Like I was on a path that was developing to the point where people were showing up that the shaman knew too, and they were not passed away yet. And then I would say, this person came to me. I see them. They're here. They will be needing to be transitioned, or they're going to be dying on this, like close to this day. And these things would then come to pass, Pandora. So it wasn't, and it wasn't like phenomenal wooey stuff. I was starting to realize that I was kind of like just looking into I just got a view in, and that they would need a way, they needed help. They needed transition work. And the shamanic path that I was on had specific rituals to, just like a lot of cultures, the person dies, people stay with them and pray and chant, maybe hold over, they don't get buried for 3 days, or maybe they get buried before sunset. Everybody has their certain traditions, and that needs to be followed because it's part of their lineage. And then when you follow these traditions and you're moving in a place where you're still in communication, it's almost like what they know now, right? You know that when someone's in a coma, they can still sense things. They can still hear you. We really should treat the people who pass over just like that. Keep the respect going. Keep the love going. Think of them. Know that they are still somehow part of this world for a while. They need to do things too, visit or make sure things are okay, or perhaps, just perhaps, they are not sure they're really gone. And that's, I remember in The Sixth Sense, you always use this as my, oh my gosh, they were kind of writing about some of the stuff. That until a soul, or not all souls, immediately go to the light. And the light can be very frightening, can be too much, or the death is traumatic. And the person is just jolted out of the body and is just hanging there, wondering what's up, not really prepared. This comes to the place where I wanted to have a group of doulas that could actually I could share not only my experiences, but these mapping techniques, the dream meditations, how to do these dream visualizations, how to work with guided visual meditations for their clients to imagine and see their end, to go beyond the end. What is it going to be like in the afterlife? Who's going to meet you? How will you get there? How do you suppose you'll get there? And would you like to have some dream help? And that's part of the practices. How to help the client way before they're ready to die, to have meditation practices, even thinking about your end. And remember, what did you used to, your mom and dad, did you ever do? Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. Remember that prayer? And if I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. That's an end of life preparation. Before we go to sleep at night, as children, we'd say this thing. Well, if I don't live through the night, I pray that the Lord takes my soul. It's putting that in your mind, preparing yourself. And this is what in the Tibetan Book of the Dead is number one. What is in your mind when you die is what you will be carrying for a while with you. The mind is like, it's like your hard drive. It's got all of the downloads. It's got all the information, and it's going to be still, the memory banks are still going to be online. In fact, Pandora, some doctor, some doctor, or PhD, just did a research and released it, studying the mind after it dies, after someone passes away. They are discovering that the memory centers of the brain is still alive, is still sending out signals. So that just goes to show that this is the Tibetans, the Buddhists, and the Tantras back in the day knew that the mind, the creative imaginal field of what you're thinking about, is absolutely critical for having your EOL plan. Where am I going after this? What do I want to expect?
From my perspective, I mean, doing the work that I do, I'm a medium as well as a shamanic healer. And so I've encountered many people who need to contact those who have just departed, or it's been some time. And I've also cleared houses, and I've had my own experiences with people who've passed as well. And people very close to me, like my grandmother. And she actually gave me a phone call when she died and left a voice message, and it was like recorded. And my parents got so freaked out by it, they recorded over it, but they were like, they knew.
Oh no.
It was like, they know the time of death at the hospital. And then she called like 45 minutes or an hour later, something like that. And she was like, help me. Like, I don't know where I am. I need you, you now. Yep. And it was recorded, and you could hear her voice. It was so clear. And I was like 12 or 13 or something. And that really, was an eye-opening experience. I'd already seen ghosts, but I was just like, but since then, my experience often has been that people do process their memories. They process their lives. And sometimes it takes a lot of time. And sometimes it seems like their conscious moves very quickly through all of that, and they get to a more Buddha state. But for some people, their personalities linger. And I think sometimes it's like they keep that personality alive to connect really in a very strong way with their loved ones, because they're like really unfinished, and either because of an accident or just because of the strength of their will to like be in their grandkid's life, or, whatever. Like is so strong that they're still very much connected to who they were in this. It's amazing. I feel like there's just so much that happens on the other side. And when people do kind of have a glimpse into that, or just intuitively feel that, or have some experiences with dreams or what have you with that, it really does take the fear out of not just the unknown, but just this idea that our consciousness is so much more than just what we experience. And it's not just a flat line of nothing.
The thing is that what you mentioned, something that was really interesting about them, certain people, certain souls linger, and some are stuck and want to move on and can't. Others blast off. They're good to go, send in the appropriate amount of time, messages to their loved ones, cool, phenomenal things. Everybody, I think almost everyone's had some kind of experience, whether they want to admit it or not, that was somewhat unsettling or wonderfully accepted when a loved one has passed and somehow communicated something. But what is really interesting to me is that this idea that the soul has its purpose always. So even the people that we feel are lingering, or if you as a medium, you might realize this person still isn't leaving because they want to watch their grandchildren grow up. All of that is part of it. And it's to be in some way, if we realize that we're still connected, always still interconnecting, we don't get all worried about trying to do anything about anyone's passing, so to speak, until the soul somehow can make it through, if it really needs help, and or anything else that might come up. So what's important, I really feel, is the honoring and the still holding the love that we have for our the people that pass, and thinking of them going and doing, I do a lot of forgiveness meditations with clients. And that's part of the Let Go program, is when people are alive, this is the time now to start getting things clear off the grid, making sure that your entanglements in the hooks and the strings, everything is off of you, out of your other people, and you are untethered and free while you're still living. Your life starts to become different. You live a better life. You live with more compassion, acceptance, and love and allowance. And this creates a whole different type of field. As you are shaking your head, yes, I know we're on the same page here, but the field that we share with each other, our personal toroidal field of energy, is the universal cosmic wide web. We're carrying it around with us. We interact with everyone on this planet and everything, plants and minerals and animals, etc., including Mother Gaia herself. This is when you start to realize, it's almost like knowing that everything's eavesdropping on you and your life. It brings you into a different type of centeredness and consciousness, and you start to live as if you live knowing that this is the reality, and it changes everything. It just changes everything.
Yes. I mean, I think that a lot of people are going around feeling like they're not fully alive because their energy isn't there. They're feeling fatigued. They're feeling not as present as they could be because of worries or fears or anxiety. And they're not letting go of the things that they need to let go of, either, trauma from the past that they're sweeping under the rug, or just not wanting to be aware of the things that aren't working, either within their own bodies or within their relationships, within their work, any number of things. And so these, as you say, these entanglements or these hooks keep them from being really clear and vital in their essence and their life force. So we've all been there. We're all works in progress, but to really be feeling ourselves instead of being pulled by the expectations of others. It doesn't mean that we can't aspire to live up to or compromise with, or, but that we have to be really clear about our own independence and our own autonomy, to feel ourselves, and also to be open to, like you say, like connecting with Gaia, connecting with Mother Earth, connecting with the vital essence and interconnectedness of the consciousness of the earth and our interconnected of our spirits, understanding that we're more than these meat suits. And, sometimes that's hard to have clarity.
What's really interesting is it was sort of in the middle somewhere that you mentioned, it's when it comes down to it, what I'm asking of my trainees and what I'm asked of my clients is very difficult. It's to take responsibility for your own life. When you start to move your view or what you're looking at, move your attention to what's within, everything outside of here will start to change. Your world will be less horrific if you can rid yourself of the horror that's living within. And that includes whatever might have happened in your past, what you're worried about for the future or your family's future. None of that is going to change anything, because you're not allowing it to change within yourself. In fact, if anything, you're a co-creator in that anxious, fearful world that you're saying that people are so exhausted from. So then everybody just falls down, exhausted and lifeless. And that's too bad. It's a waste of an opportunity to have an amazing life here, to see how you can shift and change our outward projections of this world construct through our imaginal field, through doing the work within ourselves to become the people we want everyone else to be. We have to be it first. If there's not peace within us, how can there be peace in the world or healing or any of those things? And then of course, that'll lead you to be in a place of the end is like this beautiful ending. Your life has a beautiful, passage into great, great and wondrous places.
Yeah. And I think that probably the more we can appreciate the rhythms and the passages, our life transitions before death.
That's exactly, you just hit it right. You're transitioning every single morning you wake up. Here we are. I'm reborn. What can I do different today? How's my world changed from yesterday? And that's it. That's beautiful. Yep. Transitioning every day to yourself, dying to yourself every day.
When you were talking about the messages that people get from the other side, from people who've passed, a lot of people feel that animals, especially birds, come to them with messages at certain times, and they really feel very strongly. They get this chill and sense within that it's a message from a particular beloved. I just wanted you to talk about what your perspective is on the spiritual support that we get from the other side, and also just the tradition of psychopomps.
I'm initiated weather worker, and that is the lineage of Don Lucio de Campo, who passed a while ago. It was wonderful. I got to be initiated by him and to learn how to do limpias and different types of Mesoamerican shamanic cleansings, and how to work with weather and how to call in weather and the elementals for healing work and other things, because I get a lot of music and a lot of messages from the spirit world in general through elementals. It's somehow the energy of it is very easy for people, human beings who end up passing from the material plane, but hang in here for a while to check in with loved ones. Will do that. They will come in as not just animals and plants. They always will try to become something that will catch someone's attention, obviously, but also as odors, the smell of roses or some kind of, a smell that's familiar to people of the person. Sound, you might hear your father or your grandparents, whether they're coughing or a sneeze or some kind of sound that was totally linked to them in a crowded place. And it's like 10 years later and you're looking around looking like, oh my God, that's my grandfather or that's my mom. I recognize that laugh or something. And that's their way, the way that the spirit will move through the ethers to just say hello, just to know that they are just thinking of you and maybe you them. As far as psychopomps that, like, for instance, bees and night moths and hummingbirds, Mesoamerica has those as the messengers or the carrier of the souls from this world to the next. And that's also, I think, in Egyptology and some other places further away. Same thing, certain animals and insects are relegated to that particular special task.
I'm very curious about your experience training and doing these ceremonies with regard to weather and elements.
It's semi-related to the work I do now. What it does is it keeps me in touch with the unseen. And that's part of my death doula training anyways, is the more you spend in nature, listening to the sounds of the world, it's the soul of the world that we are part of. Our soul isn't disconnected from it. And so, I always suggest my trainees take some media breaks, shut off, have a media fast, whether it's, a certain chunk of time in the day or at night, or maybe one whole day or a weekend where there's no cell phones, no computers. And you have a beautiful place where you live in Cape Cod, go to the beach, go to a beautiful forest or a waterfall, or go camping even. That's great when you can sleep out at night on Mother Earth. And when you start to do things like that, you start to listen differently, you start to open up. Remember, then your modem, like mine, crashed this morning. It just It's not necessary really for the true communication, for the real goodies. You want to connect to the to the cosmic wide web, and to put a different type of receiver up there to receive it. You have to shut out all the material plane, down, and move into the different field altogether. So that's part of the great big part of being a weather worker, or being in that type of tradition, is working with the natural elements and the unseen real of Mother Earth. In these really old texts, one of them, the Vajana Bhairava, this is a tantric text that's one of the earliest texts. After the Rig Veda and the Upanishads, there were these texts that started to appear in something BC, when Sanskrit started to become a written language. And there was this one text that I love. It's a conversation between the creator of the world and the creatrix of the world. It's a couple talking back and forth. And in this book, it mentions constantly the word bhavantu or bhavet, which is all about the imagination, the imaginal field. If you disconnect from the imaginal field, you disconnect from source. Because source, all of this, and this is quantum physics now, this is all light and sound. Our whole material construct is sound and light waves. Okay, these waves that are just moving, that look solid, and we all know now isn't actually solid. So light and sound, if everything's built on light and sound, it takes the imagination, the brain, to start to pull it in together into some kind of form. And once our brain starts to develop and we're showed forms and labeling forms, et cetera, we start to identify things and take it for granted that what we're seeing is exactly what our brain is telling us. So how many times have you thought there was a giant snake on the road and it's a piece of rope, or there's a bag that's on a post and you think it's a bear, but it's a plastic bag when you finally drive up close to it, but your brain is shouting, bear, slow down. So what happens is that the imaginal field is crucial for getting ourselves from believing. It's like, no, it would be like believing everything that's on your computer. In fact, you only know what the weather is because you check your phone. You never go outside and actually see if it's raining or not, but you believe it's raining. That's like the brain. But the imaginal field is actually moving into, we're going to leave this hard drive and we're going to now go into something that's natural, something that actually might be rain, might be like hard rain, soft rain, a different type of rain, lots of different types of rains and snow, etc. So the imaginal field has more to look at, process, to actually have a relationship with. And that's what develops. And that's what becomes your doorway into multiple dimensions of reality and potential and creation. I mean, so many creative things out there, but you got to step away from the usual stuff all the time being, given to your brain. And that's all you got to work with. I mean, all of our greatest thinkers were daydreamers. All the people who have invented things, it just pops in. It's like you're relaxing, you're open, and suddenly your antenna is up. You're not on the internet. You're not looking at your phone. Instead, you're starting to connect with something greater than this planet. And lo and behold, there's a lot of stuff out there that's just waiting to come in to upgrade humanity and to help us. to hopefully help us evolve into kinder and more peaceful, well, I don't even know what to call us, peaceful something or others, and bring us into a place of cooperation and compatibility versus compatibility. Instead of fighting, how can we collaborate? How can we be compatible? And how do we work together to accelerate, bring all this acceleration that's happening into some kind of cohesive unity? The weave is beautiful versus it's a little bit here and a little bit there, and there's a big hole here, It takes people to start to join that unified field of that we are one with everything, that we aren't separate, and we have nothing to prove. In the end, it all comes back to that this is a place that has so much potential, and how can we start to think differently about it? And it's to put our attention first inside and start to imagine a much more beautiful place, much more beautiful planet of people, much more beautiful culture. And struggling usually with pain or some kind of medical situation, and they can't be hospiced at home because maybe they're having seizures or they need something else that isn't available in home care. And that can be a very trying thing especially for the client who realizes that, gosh, this was my plan and I can't die at home. But when they've done the practices, or if they have a doula that has some of the training that I offer, they end up in a different place again within. And the outside part becomes merely something that is no longer really going to matter in some regards. Unfortunately, the medication part, I know a lot of my clients would like to have a conscious death where they are just slowly leaving the plane, falling asleep into a type of pre-death sleep, and having a peaceful ending. Who doesn't want that? But the medication part is sometimes it's very necessary in order for people not to have a painful ending, which is also usually painful for the relatives or the loved ones that are nearby. But there's usual ways. Doctors are really stepping up these days. Palliative care is very attentive to the needs of not only the clients, but to make sure that the spiritual aspect of it, their wishes are followed. And so that's hopeful. It's more of the people, us as a human species, how we can really shift everything with doing these death practices way before the end, way before.
What you were saying about that transition period, I mean, I've seen with many people, many of my clients, relatives, but also in my own life, there seems to be, for some people, many years even, where they're kind of in and out of this reality as we know it, and somewhere else. Like people will, whether they have dementia or not, they'll be like, oh, I was visited by my sister, or oh, I saw my husband, and and I think that's happening. I mean, it could be said that their brains are just processing their emotions just in the same way that a dream could be. But I firmly believe that it's a spiritual experience that they're having, and they're picking up on the consciousness of a loved one. And it's a process that is really helpful and they're naturally preparing themselves when that's happening.
Sure. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, whether it's a spiritual or a physical happening, a phenomenon due to someone's either medication or what's going on in their brain, it's hard to know unless, you're really hooked in. But what is most important is if we look at it as all true, it's all real, that what the person is sharing with us near the end of their life, or maybe they have dementia and they're talking to us about things, these things that are coming from this other human being are of value still. It might be confusing for us because we don't understand what they're saying or what they're referring to, but it would be just like as if your view of out one window and you're trying to describe it to another person who's looking out a different window. And they're telling you, you're crazy. There's a hill here, and you're like, no, it's flat and there's a road and there's some cars. So, if we look at things like that, we start to reel in our judgments and our deciding someone isn't quite on the mark or there's something wrong with them. They've lost it. I mean, that's how they used to talk about shamans back in the day anyways, or anyone who had a foot in one world, hopefully today, people start to become even more conscious and things change a little bit, as far as how we treat people with dementia and Alzheimer's in the end days.
And, it can be confusing and a struggle too, because a lot of times people who have Alzheimer's are combative and don't remember their most beloved.
Of course.
And so who can say what all of that is and what they're working out past life?
Exactly.
From the past or what's going on with their brains. But yeah, to just approach it with curiosity.
With compassion. And compassion.
So what does that road look like? And where does it lead? And
exactly. You can learn a lot if you ask the right questions.
So your website is Linda-Go. You do trauma relief.
Yes.
And you also have your school for doulas.
And it's all pretty much online. Music too. People can also find me on Bandcamp if they want to hear some of the chanting or some of the songs that I sort of write or that come through and that is dictated to me.
And I would love for you to go out with a Sanskrit chant.
Okay, well, here's a simple one to translate as death is the greatest teacher. And it's Om Namah Shivaya Gurave. And when you start to repeat Om Namah Shivaya Gurave, and you do it maybe as many times as you want, maybe before you go to sleep at night, it's like the Sanskrit version of now I lay me down to sleep. And knowing that death is our greatest teacher, and to not be shy to show up when people are ill even, and to see if you can sit bedside a little bit or check in and tell people that you're thinking of them, to not be afraid to even check in with people who have lost someone and to have a conversation with them, and just don't shy away from death. Move toward it as something that can teach us so much about life and how to live better than we are.
Well, thank you so much, Linda-Go, for joining us today.
You're welcome, Pandora. Thanks for having me on your wonderful program. It was great. I had a lot of fun.
You've been listening to Healing Wisdom at Outermost Radio. All of our shows are podcasts at WOMR.org. Also check out healingwisdomradioshow.com and contact me at pandora@WOMR.org.